This is Stigma, where we talk with leaders from many industries about how mental health and addiction have impacted their lives. Many people suffer silently from mental illness, addiction, depression, anxiety, and trauma. They never seek help because of stigma. In this podcast, host Stephen Hayes and his guests share their stories of recovery in order to encourage others to do the same. Here's Stephen.
Welcome back to another episode of the Stigma podcast. Today's guest is going to talk to us about men's mental health. He's the founder and CEO of a company called EVRYMAN, which hosts men's small groups and helps men deal with specific mental health issues related to their lives as men. And we're going to talk about why men specifically have certain mental health issues and problems and struggles. And we're going to talk about how to deal with those. So our guest is Lucas Krump. He's the founder and CEO of a startup called EVRYMAN. And without further ado, Lucas, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Great to catch up, Stephen. I appreciate the opportunity.
So tell me a little bit about EVRYMAN and the founding story and how you found your way to this calling.
EVRYMAN is a men's wellness organization focused on supporting men with mental and emotional health. We take an approach of, what we would call peer-to-peer support. And so we combine both online as well as offline activities, and we bring men together to practice developing their mental and emotional health so that they can support themselves from a place of proactivity versus reactivity as it relates to the issues that every man faces in his life. In terms of the story of EVRYMAN, it's a long story, so I'll try to give you the abbreviated version. Basically, for me personally, I had gotten to a point in my life, I was 37 years old. I was living in New York City and was doing the startup hustle, so to say, and was with a company that was acquired, and really got to a point in my life where things just weren't working. I knew that I had accomplished a lot of material successes, but from a deeper satisfaction level in my own life and my own happiness, I just wasn't there. And so I really, at 37, started to look inwards and try to figure out what was it that I was missing, and what did I need? Because on paper, I really felt like I had most of the things that I was told that as a man would make me happy, but happy was the furthest thing that I was experiencing. And so as I began to explore what was out there to support me in doing that, I was actually at my therapist at the time, who he made two very strong recommendations to me. He said, one, you're going to need to grow yourself up. And two, you're going to need to find a group of men that would help you to do that. And so those two things stuck with me. I went back to New York City and started to look around what was out there. And in doing so, I came across my co-founder, Dan Doty, as well as Owen, who is also one of our co-founders, and Sascha, who were having a men's retreat. And I went to that retreat openly, sort of looking to find out what it was all about. And what I found there was a deeper sense of connection and really what I was missing in my life. And I think that what I was missing was the relationship that I had to myself and that I had to others. And we started in 2017. The first retreat was actually in December of 2016, but we really sort of formalized the vision of what we wanted to create in 2017, which was really a men's wellness organization that, again, supported men to connect with themselves and others. And that connection ultimately supports their mental and emotional health, as well as giving men a community to be part of, and also looking at wellness from a perspective of accessibility and ease of entry, if you will. And so we started out on this path, and Me Too and a lot of other events culturally happened, which really turned our society's focus on men. And, we as an organization were there to receive that. And we've been growing really ever since.
That's great, man. I really appreciate that background. And you had mentioned a concept that I like to talk about, which is proactive versus reactive. What does that mean? What does that look like?
I think if you look at the stigma associated with mental and emotional health, let's just start with mental health. The behavioral healthcare industry has done a great job in sort of ring fencing the entire human experience as it relates to feelings and saying that therapy is the best option for that. Unfortunately, social stigma around what therapy means, i.e. weakness, as well as cost barriers and things like that, ultimately prevents a lot of men from going to therapy and getting the help that they need. At the same time, if we look at what men go through and what we've been taught is, how do we have a relationship with ourselves? How do we experience our own emotions? And how do we express how we feel to others?
What do men go through? Like, what's the thing that's specific to being a man that you would tease out here?
Yeah, well, every man experiences life differently, but ultimately men go through different transitions, right? Going from a young man to an adult, in your 20s, you get your first job. In your 30s, you start to progress forward in life. We get married, we have kids. We all have similar, if you will, life transitions, if you will. That's what I would call them. But I think oftentimes what men go through is the experience of going through each one of those events alone. We often try and socially, culturally, like we've been told that we need to go at it alone, right? We've been conditioned from a very young age to look at things in the singular pursuit of accomplishment, as well as the notion that things are a zero-sum game. And so oftentimes what you see is men are experiencing a lot of the transitions that we all face in life, but they're not doing that within community and connection with other men. And so that can be a very lonely and isolating place.
So it's like the societal pressure, right? Because women go to college and get jobs and have kids, and sometimes they experience loneliness as well. So I think the thing that really stood out to me about what you said was there's this societal pressure on men that's unique to encourage them to do things alone. Is that right?
Absolutely. Societally, we've been told that there's a certain set of accomplishments or there are certain ways of being as a man that we need to live up to. And that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on men to achieve those things.
Where did that come from? Like, where did this pressure originate from? It's going to sound really like a basic question, but who came up with that idea and started pushing that on men?
I definitely feel like if you look at the transition, if you look historically, when we transitioned from kind of a farming-based society to a more industrial society, we moved out of collaborating and working together in community and into individualized jobs and individualized pursuits, right? And so we shifted from interacting in community to more of an individualized effort in our own life. And I think that was the very beginning of that. If you look historically, like when the Boy Scouts were founded, they were founded on the principle of actually supporting men to get back into this community and teaching men how to interact in a troop, if you will. And so it's interesting to see how that narrative has unfolded as our society has moved forward.
One thing you mentioned when we were talking about proactive and reactive was this idea that people are probably, I guess, naturally reactive about their mental health. And what can we do to get men specifically to be proactive? What does that transition look like? Does it take disaster, or can we help men avoid disaster and start being proactive without having to go through a quote unquote bottom of some sort, if you will?
Well, if you look at the path that men, I want to speak specifically for men, but I don't want to generalize and say that women don't experience the same thing. But men often deal with the acute pain that they're experiencing in life from a place of crisis, right? I read a statistic the other day that, from a man first identifying that he has an issue, quote unquote issue, to him actually doing anything about it can be anywhere from 8 to 10 years. And oftentimes when he makes a decision to do something about that, it's from a place of crisis, right? He's already blown up his life, and now he's starting to think about, and there's collateral damage, and now he's trying to repair versus prepare for the inevitable events that every man is going to go through in his life.
Got it. How did you come to this idea that you could help men with this, and how did it start? Because my understanding is that it started out as sort of groups, very like a physical, tangible thing, and now you're moving to like more of a digital solution. So how did it start and where's EVRYMAN going?
EVRYMAN started many years before the first official EVRYMAN retreat in December of 2016. So much of our work is based on one of our co-founders, Owen Marcus. He's been working with men for 35 years and really working with men both in groups and on an individual basis as a body worker. He's actually a rolfer by trade, and really looking at how men experience trauma and how we process emotion and how we deal with stress and anxiety. What's the physiological relationship that we have to that and how that impacts our physical health and our mental health? And then what's the emotional relationship with that? And so we talk a lot about emotional physiology. In our offline work, we sit in groups because we're practicing what we call emotional CrossFit. We're actually going through a set of practices, and we've developed a methodology, which is the EVRYMAN method, where we are practicing the ability to actually slow down, connect with our own individual experience, and then from that place, connect with others. And there's so much science that talks about the benefit of that, all the way from the ability for us when we sit in groups to co-regulate our nervous system to reduce stress and anxiety, as well as what happens in our brain when we are connected and experiencing emotion, empathy from a mirror neurons perspective. There's a lot happening when we sit in groups, and that's a big part of what we've been doing. But as you rightfully said, we identified early on that we could never reach 1 million men. That's our big goal if we were doing that all offline. So we've shifted to focus the business online and enabling men to basically sit in groups in an online capacity, as well as supporting them on an individual level through our online platform. And what we've seen is that by basically making access for men to connect with other men in this capacity, so many more men are coming to us as a result. It's incredibly exciting.
So one of the things you said that I want to understand better is this idea of co-regulating a nervous system. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, there's plenty of science that looks into this, but we've been addressing mental health issues in groups for quite some time. I mean, you look at very successful organizations like AA and the millions of men that they support, and the backbone of that organization is 12-step groups, as well as different types of support groups around different issues. And I believe that we have an innate ability to care for ourselves and others. What prevents us from doing that is actually creating the space to have that experience. So when we actually slow down and sit intentionally in a group with a set of agreements of a way of operating and showing up, and in AA, that's the 12 steps. Within EVRYMAN, we have a set of practices and sort of agreements that regulate our groups. That creates intentionality and it creates safety. And from that place, I can actually slow down. I, as an individual, can feel safe and I can express myself. And if everyone is doing that together, we are collectively experiencing our individual human experience and that experience of others. And so when we slow down, when we connect, the science tells us that it actually reduces our stress and anxiety. So the very act of sitting together in groups, expressing vulnerability, connecting with other individuals from a place of intention and safety allows us to co-regulate or collectively reduce the stress and anxiety that we may be feeling.
How long does that last? I mean, how often do I need to go to one of these groups if I'm getting that benefit from it?
I think that's a great question, because men, we immediately go to, okay, give me the playbook, tell me how to do it. Okay, I'll do it once. If we look at behavior change, there's actual state change and there's behavior change. And so oftentimes we tend to look at state change. We go to a retreat experience or we go to a week-long intensive experience or something like that. But that ultimately doesn't change our behavior, and it doesn't over time expand our emotional capacity. So our recommendation is to sit in a weekly group, and EVRYMAN offers the ability for men to be connected with a like-minded group of men and sit in that group every week online, or participate in what we call a drop-in group, which every day we have various drop-in groups that men can sign on to and participate in. And it's not a regular group of men like our groups, but it gives them the ability to participate in that on a daily basis or on a weekly basis if they want to.
So tell me a little bit about the business itself. I mean, what are you looking for? Are you looking for customers? Are you looking for employees? Are you looking for investors? Where are you with your business, and who do you want to get involved with you, and how can they do that?
I mean, EVRYMAN is growing, and I think that, I'm not 100% sure when this is going to be released, but the current crisis that we're experiencing, COVID, one of the first things I did when this came upon us and we started to look at how we reoriented our business because we were unequivocally impacted. I looked at what happened to men historically, post-Great Depression, post-economic recessions, and we are at tremendous risk. The longer men are out of work, the longer men are experiencing extended levels of economic insecurity, the faster our mental and emotional health deteriorates. So I really feel like there is a looming mental health crisis. If we weren't already in that crisis, there's an even bigger crisis that is on the back end of COVID. So in terms of what we need as an organization, we need partners. We need partners to help us reach more men. We need supporters and individuals that see the value of our work and want to tell other men. And I think we also need capital to be able to grow and to run our operation. I mean, we've been a bootstrapped organization to date. And if we look at the need for what we have to offer and the benefits that men can receive from it, we have to grow very fast. And so capital will allow us to do that and accelerate that path.
That's great. So if I'm just a dude out there and I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, man, this could be helpful for me, how do I take the first step?
Yeah, I mean, the first step to get involved is, I'd go online. We've been very fortunate to have been featured, on the Today Show and GQ and Men's Health. Our work has been recognized really all over the world. And so there's plenty of information out there about what our organization has done or how it's framed. So you can start by just reading, but you can also go to everyman.com, and twice a week we have open groups. So men can jump onto one of our global calls, or they can participate in a drop-in group for free. And, there's various levels of participation. They can, in a global call, you can just listen. You don't have to say anything. In a drop-in group, you can participate as much or as little as you want. And then if either one of those experiences resonates for you, you can become a member of EVRYMAN. And the membership of EVRYMAN provides men with various access points as well as tools and resources through online learning, live groups, individualized practices that all support us in developing our emotional health. I think, men need to get it out of their head that strength is physical strength, right? Emotional resiliency and our ability to actually experience our emotions and from that place act. It's like our superpower. And we don't, as men, actually do anything to develop it. It's probably one of the most important muscles that we have. And it's certainly the most unique muscle that we have as humans, if you think about it, because AI and all these other things are figuring out ways to, we've got robots and we've got AI to do equations and all the other things that they're doing. But this ability that we have to feel and emote and connect is what makes us human. And we don't spend any time actually focusing on it and developing it. And that's what we do at EVRYMAN. Emotional workout. We expand our emotional capacity and develop our emotional resiliency.
I think one of the things that keeps men from getting help or getting to where you just described is stigma. And that's our primary topic on the podcast is, really encouraging these conversations and talking about mental health and addiction and recovery so that we reduce stigma and we make it more normal to talk about these things. How do you think stigma impacts men specifically?
I think there's two sides of stigma, and I'd like to answer that from broader mental health and then get into men. Unequivocally, there's stigma associated with therapy, right? The mental health and our mental issues. I'm crazy. I've heard that, and I've certainly felt that at times. Has been looked down upon, and so the very notion that one needs to go and get help for that there's all sorts of shame. And shame is a very powerful emotion that can trap us and can prevent us from doing a lot of things. At the same time, there's a stigma around mental health care and the very notion that there's kind of only one way to address those mental and emotional health issues, i.e. through individualized talk-based or evidence-based therapy, right? Which I think are incredibly beneficial programs. And certainly, one of the things that I'm most proud of is the number of men that come to EVRYMAN and then end up actually going to traditional therapy. But at the same time, for us to truly address mental health at scale, we have to look at alternative modalities. We have to look at alternative ways of treatment and care. And we have to accept the fact that for men, one-on-one talk-based, evidence-based therapy has social stigma and baggage and cost barriers associated with it. And it may not be the optimal solution. There may be other solutions out there. And so I had a therapist, I was on a panel recently talking with actual therapists, and they asked me that very same question, Stephen. And I said, quit calling it therapy. Unfortunately, therapy has a tremendous amount of baggage associated with it. Call it something else. We have to reframe that conversation. We have to create, quite frankly, a completely new industry and new products that are specifically designed for men, that give men an opportunity to have a different experience and perceive that experience to be different than what traditionally we've been told we should be doing to care for our mental health.
What can we be doing to encourage other men? And maybe that's just a rephrasing of how do we reduce stigma, but what do we have to do to get men to talk about this and to start to take those first steps?
Well, I think what's important, and I just really want to applaud you. I mean, we met probably 8 or 9 months ago, and I was just personally blown away and just inspired with your level of transparency and honesty around your own experience. And that, the very act of sharing in that way, it's courageous, it's brave, but what it does is it models to other men that that's okay, that we don't have to sit in the shame of that we can actually use that as a source of strength and renewal in our lives. And so what we can do as men, the men that are at that place in their lives, more of those men could speak out and model their own experience. And it gives access and license for other men to do the same and find the help and the care, whether it's EVRYMAN or anything else, to open up and start to address those issues that are impacting them. Unfortunately, so many men suffer in silence, and it breaks my heart. I mean, it's that suffering. And I mean, thousands of men have come through EVRYMAN, and I've interacted and participated with them. And that it's just deeply impacted me on so many levels. And that's what motivates me, myself and my team, to continue to do this work and build EVRYMAN into the organization that it can be.
Well, that's great, man. I applaud what you're doing. Thank you for the kind words. And I know we're coming to the end of our time here. Is there anything I missed?
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing is our industry, call it mental health, call it wellness or whatever. What's very important for me is making wellness and making the products or the services, because I love the innovation that's happening in the mental/behavioral health industry right now. But we can't pigeonhole those and focus on one type of being. One of the things I'm most proud of is just the sheer numbers of men that we have from Kansas and Nebraska and North Carolina and Alabama and Montana, right? So I would just encourage people to be developing products and services that really speak to all people, not just the coast or not just a very specific type of wellness, if you will, because there's so many people out there that could benefit from what we're all collectively doing in this industry. And I don't believe it's a zero-sum game. I actually think that we're making the pie bigger, and we're pushing this conversation and the innovation to address this issue at scale forward, the more we collaborate and work together.
I agree with you, man. And I appreciate you coming on, and thank you for doing this. And thank you for carving out time on what I'm sure is a busy Friday afternoon to share your thoughts with us.
It is. Thanks a lot, Stephen. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's incredibly inspiring.
Thank you again, Lucas, for coming on and for spending your time with us today. We're really grateful to have you. And thank you to our listeners for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for connecting with us on social media. If you would like to reach out, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us via email, info@stigmapodcast.com. We're on Twitter @StigmaCast, and we're on Instagram @StigmaPodcast. And we want your feedback. And if you like our content, we'd love to have you subscribe, like, review, follow on your podcast platform of choice. And until next time, stay safe.